business unit and try to figure out what data is there with multiple other business units. That is quite a time consuming and a cost impact workshop, basically. And post the workshop, the data is unclassified because there could be a data which is left and it is not classified because the workshop is for a particular time period, which means you start getting incomplete coverage. Then comes this third part of it, where companies started procuring labeling tools. Unfortunately, labels were good, but they were human driven, which means there are a lot of error. Now, what companies start doing? They started doing all the combination of all three aspects, which required a lot of constant work and at the same time, a lot of money and time involved in it. Now, once the data got classified, okay, and after that, there are multiple kind of technologies with multiple solution. Even Zscaler has these technologies. You must have heard of these in the industry. There could be file fingerprinting, which they could be structured data, EDM they call it. There could be data in the image. There could be multiple kind of labels, self machine learning, regex, data identifiers, which is also a part of small regex. There could be multiple technologies which do find out and detect the data. Unfortunately, what happened is the end result was that there were too many alerts and organizations started struggling with these technologies. Now, this is where most of the organizations started building multiple other practice in terms of how do we take care of, how do we fine tune it, how do we remediate it, and that started involving a lot of other cost in terms of operational cost. Now, the biggest challenge even the operational team faced is when they started looking at the detection, the context was missing. I'll give an example. You from the technology aspect, with all the classification, you want to find out Apple as a company, which released iPhone. However, the system started detecting this as a keyword and giving you Apple as a fruit. Now, this is where the majority of the context started missing. Another example is probably you're looking out for Aadhaar card or driving license within the data, and it started detecting on the URL. Now URL can have multiple numbers, right, in it, and it'll start detecting there. It's definitely a false word because the system did not understand the context, where it is, why it is. Is it supposed to be there in URL? URL cannot have this kind of information. Now, this is where a better approach was required, which means this is the era of course, AI. And if we cannot inject intent and intelligence into these kind of solution to discover our data, then what is the use, right? Now, for that matter, what Zscaler did, we knew that this is not solving the problem. This is where we introduce LLMs. You call it SLMs or LLMs. We basically build in 200 plus categories where whether it is a document is financial document, legal document, HR document, or multiple other kind of source code or anything. Now, whether this data is at rest or this data in motion, will be able to figure out, which means you no need to run those manual workshops with a business unit. That saves your time and cost, which means your labels are correctly mapped within, and you can have a look at it. Now, this particular piece, we had to inject into our solution. Not only we did that, but we did that at data in motion, wherever the data is flowing. And at the same time, we did that in data at rest on the endpoint. I'll also talk about data, more about this data, but when we reached here, of course, looking at the DPDP aspect, right? Now, what it basically talks about is how do I discover the data on large repositories? Right, fair enough. Data in motion at endpoint, data in motion at network, data at rest on endpoint, data at rest. What about the data at rest on the large repository? That became the challenge, and this is where DPDP comes into action. But first, we need to understand what exactly DPDP talks about in 2025. So yes, there are a few more security measures in terms of security safeguards. There are a few measures in terms of prevent the unauthorized access and more to do with retaining the access logs. Notify the breach if it happens within 72 hours, appoint the DPO. Now we are seeing in the industry that a lot of internal movements are happening because the DPO positions are getting opened up in a lot of organizations. So that's another piece what we are noticing. And of course, there are multiple other in terms of the data should not cross your Indian territory when we talk about the cross-border transfers. And of course, PI data with respect to kids and specially enabled people. And of course, the most important aspect is the consent part of it, right? That also has to be introduced in the program. Now, when we break this down into what exactly an organization should be doing it. So first, they should be discovering where your data. Now, after discovering, they should be able to classify whether it is a PI data or not. Then the third step comes is you need to figure it out who has access to the data. And of course, then you should be able to remove the data, encrypt the data, or watermark, or do multiple other kind of aspects. And in the end, as per the 2025, you should be able to retain the logs. Now, this is where, again, Zscaler jumped in, and you can use the same AI-based LLMs and discover DPDP specific data onto your any repository, whether those are on S3 buckets, AWS, Azure, GCP, or they are your on-premise database services like Oracle, SQL, and multiple other. Now, this is where the first step gets over. Now you have discovered the data, right? And you can have a nice representation of the data so that you know, hey, these are my critical data, these are the amount of files, these are the amount of repository I have. Now you have everything. Now comes the second part of it, which is data in motion. It could be on a SaaS application, right? How do we protect that? And this is where Zscaler SPM comes into the picture, which not only gives you the posture management, but at the same time, discover data on SaaS applications, and of course, give you a control by preventive measures. So and so, I will not talk much deeper into it because we'll have another sessions onto it. But to give you a gist of it, we are the only leaders in SSPM. So that's a Forrester Wave leaders quadrant, and you can see that Zscaler sits on the top right corner. The other aspect is where your data is moving, which is very concerning in the industry, is AI, right? The Gen AI used in various different organizations. And this is where we have the capability not just to tell you that, hey, how many Gen AI apps you're using in the environment, but what kind of data it is moving out. Not just that, which are the departments which are using what kind of Gen AIs, what is the sensitive data in it, top users, and of course, even we capture the prompts. And if that prompt has a confidential data in it, we map it to the data security engines of it. Now, this is on the visibility side of it. What we can do on the protection side of it is not just we can do a browser isolation where it's the experience would be same for the employees, right? Where they will not feel anything. However, the data is there in the browser. They'll be able to access the GenAI app if you sanction it and you let them use it. but they will not be able to upload any sensitive data. They will only be able to prompt the data, right? And of course, when we talk about user education, we can even watermark that so that they are aware that they're not supposed to upload any data. Looks like something like this, where the browser itself gives that experience, and there is no basically I would say from a user experience there are no changes. It'll be as same as how they're browsing into normal days. Now, data is same, right? Uh, moving at a different places, and if you do not have a single pane of glass, there are multiple challenges. And this is where your data can be moving. We go to the step one again, over the network, over the web, over the endpoint, over the email, over the SaaS applications, or probably multiple databases. This is where we designed end-to-end, single platform, single console, single sensor to do all the job. And of course, we are also addressing the elephant in the house, which is Gen AI. Everything been taken care from a single console, single platform. So and so that you all know that Zscaler is mastered in SSE Magic Quadrant. However, if we talk about MarketScape, IDC, we are sitting in the leaders. Now, when we talk about MarketScape, it's basically talking about the adoption of the technology in the industry, right? If you see Broadcom, Netscape, ForcePoint, pretty old players in terms of adoption and from a data security practice. Zscaler came up with data security practice just last 2.5 years before. And we're already there, which means the adoption is so fast that people are trusting Zscaler on data security because the products are much more enhanced and better. Now comes the last part, right? We took care of the data. We found out where your data is. We took care of the data in motion, gave you a single pane of glass. The third most important aspect where we are capable of reducing the incidents and uh, reducing the operational overheads in multiple environments is through our workflows. And these workflows have the capability to reduce incident volume by 65% and reduce and put 40% of those into automation. And these are just not numbers. We actually have done this at multiple customer places and showed it to customers how it has been done. And we received amazing feedback, which you can read it on the right-hand side. Overall, when we talk about data security, data everywhere, uh, it is always not just technology, but people, process, and technology together. And this is where you see whatever the spendings are there on the tool. Probably you'll spend 2x more than that onto the operations part of it, the process part of it. And we at Zscaler have reduced that particular part and put into automation using AI, not only into detection, but incident remediation, data classification, and reduce the operational overhead to a level where we can give a ROI of over 300%. And this is something which we are not talking about. This is something which IDC, and probably you can scan it and download the full report and find out how we can perform that cost saving. So that's all from my side. Thank you, everyone. And we are open for next, but I would like to invite Priya to basically take the lead over here.
Thanks, Jimmy, for that. Hi, everyone. I think, Jimmy, you did covered about in today. I would just first like to start with. I often hear when we hear about DPDPA to start with, I really like to highlight about it Um, I think what we mostly talk about is we talk about how it is a data. I think most of the people understand it is a data privacy law, and I think I really want to clarify on this. Whenever I talk about it as a group and from practitioner point of view, I like to everybody to understand data privacy. It may be GDPR, it may be CCPA, it may be China, it may be Saudi, it may be any privacy act. End of the day, privacy aspects are regulatory aspects of it. Yes, they are key, but underlying element is 85% is protection aspect of it. So whenever anybody talks about DPO rules, they talk about DPDPA, we immediately think of, okay, there is something with respect to law. Yes, it is a law, it is an act, there is no doubt about it. But what underlying message I want to put in and convey in here is on the top of the regulation aspect of it, that is law of the land. For example, now for India, we have DPDPA. We need to understand whatever law is suggesting on a 80 to 85% on down of it. There is a regulatory, there is a protection aspect of it. It may help you to understand that, okay, for example, DPDPA, when we have more clarity on with respect to cross-border transfer, we may understand, okay, we may send this to country A or B. That is what law suggests. But moment we need to understand how the data is going in rest or transit that we talked about is the key. Irrespective of the compliance we are looking at, we talked about, a lot of you wrote about GDPR, CCPA, NIST, etc. End of the day, it is all about law of the land plus how we are moving data with respect to transit, rest, and all the peripheral controls that we need in security. So on that note, from a practitioner perspective, I'll just share some slides. I'd like just to quickly talk about a few aspects from DPA point of view that we think are really important. And as a practitioner point of view, I'd like to highlight a few points. Allow me a minute. I'm just sharing my screen here. My screen is visible.
Not yet. Yes, it is now.
Yeah. I always believe from a practitioner perspective, it's very important how you, it's not much important how you go into a room because when you all as a leaders are looking an implementation aspect of DPDPA, please understand, end of the day, people rely on you, board relies on you, management relies on you. They may not know the terminologies of it. It needs to be broken into very simple aspect. They just want to understand if you are starting on DPDPA journey, what is that basic you need to have in place in order to ensure that at least not you go step by step and improve it, but at least what are those basic understandings and safeguard that you need to ensure with respect to DPDPA when you are starting. So from that perspective, if you ask me from a cloud native solutions perspective, from DPDPA, the first aspect is security measures for data protection. And let me quickly highlight that about these cloud native solutions, they really because whenever you going forward with respect to DPDPA, you will sign technical and organization measures. You will have to exchange in contract what are those technical measures that with a vendor, with a customer, with a sub-org you're going to sign. That's going to be the start point. And when you start on that, you are going to talk about different aspect of encryption, anonymization, access control, audit trials, data management policies, etc., etc. All the security based, protection based aspects. So when you're going to sign this in a contract, you need to give a assurance that how you are going to do it. So tomorrow, if you are going to sign a business with somebody where we need to enable and ensure DPDP is in compliance, you are going to, as an organization, these questions will be asked that what are the technical measures you have already in place to ensure that we are meeting with DPDPA. So just to summarize, these are just four quick points that will you will have to kind of ensure. And what happens with these cloud native solutions? They help in them. Um, Not only they have provisions for it with respect to audit controls, audit trials, which is very important. I think if we have key aspects like access control managed, internal data management policies, because every organization is different to nature, and if you have a framework that helps you to in customization those data management policies, see what can be critical with respect to a policy for one domain and group may not be importantly or necessarily be important for other organization. Based on my experience, I can tell you what was critical for my A organization. Now I see in my B organization, it's not critical. Something else is critical. So with these solutions, it helps cloud native solution. It helps you in that kind of a customization. And what is important in DPDPA, I want you to understand it's the trial. I think we often miss the trial part of it. It's about in case something goes right or something goes wrong. In both scenarios, one, there is a continual improvement. You need to have details audit trial. We often don't talk about these areas, but that trial that kind of help you to having a SOC understanding, regular monitoring of your policies, plus in case something happens. For example, I have written about breach notification and incident response. In DPDPA, within 72 hours, you not only need to kind of report to the person for whom data subject, I'll just use data subject language because that is familiar with most. You need to inform data subject within 72 hours. You need to go for a kind of correction and you need to inform the board also. So that is the prompt response, Data Protection Board of India will expect. In such scenarios, you need some automated cloud solution where you go back quickly, you understand what has gone wrong, and then understand through it what proactively we can be done to correct it. So based on my experience, these kind of a cloud native solutions, they really help. These two key areas are main. I'll still touch upon the other area of, for example, data subject rights. So these kind of a platform, they what how they help in access, correlation, erasure, restriction of processing, and especially data portability. They kind of help you to automate and manage these requests securely. So these kind of a native platform, they become one point solution for everything to start with. And in tomorrow, you have to kind of not within India. If you have to send data outside border and whatever countries are allowed as per DPDPA, you can monitor, you can put restriction with respect to these with these platforms and native solutions and cloud solutions. You can monitor country specific restrictions, which manually is impossible. You can put in a control that what you can allow and what you want to stop. And there are, what I want to say is, for example, from practitioner perspective, I'm saying we always say that we have policies and we have abide by them. But what I have seen in my career, exceptions, irrespective of the process, how we need those exceptions. And we may kind of say that this for general employees or general user, this is restricted, but it is always a scenario we need to give some exceptions. With cloud platforms like this, it helps them to putting those kind of it gives a flexibility to business, because end of the day, we all are asking them to do extra. And in case to support business, if they want that, okay, we need this exception with the accountability set on them. How to do that? How to track that? One, giving that exception. Secondly, tracking that and ensuring that it is used as per acceptable usage policy given to them as an exception. So these kind of native tools really help in them. And as a business person, they do see that as a collaboration. Okay, we have a process to follow, but when business needed an exception, teams were able to kind of help us with that, because it's already about that flexibility and at the same time setting the accountability. So these kind of a platform help you kind of align that with your business objective. In case some exceptions are required, you can control them. You can control it user specific, you can control it URL specific, you can really customize it, keep it short, and keep on reviewing those policies, and put a timeline also to that this is allowed only for 30 days. So those kind of a that kind of a facility is important. It's not possible to control that through tool, through any manual process, I can assure you on that. It can be a medium organization, large, you need that kind of a platform that helps you to enable that kind of a feature, and it is a feel good factor for business also. So it helps, as I said, country specific restrictions. You can put safeguard for what data is went out. You can put IP restrictions. You can exempt, you can put that it shouldn't go in here. And for significant data fiduciaries where we have large amount of data, and that's why we categorize them at significant data fiduciaries, that help in, it is important that they do data protection impact assessment. So how these platforms help, you know, the data is there, policies are set in there, what data goes out, comes in with respect to risk. And what I have recently seen is when we talk about especially AI, I think when leadership came to us and they said that's okay, where are you setting the boundary for AI? Even for DPA perspective, I'm saying tomorrow, in case the moment we all are into AI umbrella and we all are working on it. As Jimmy just talked about, he talked about who is accessing which kind of data, which kind of a portal, which kind of a browser. These platforms, I can assure you, by using such kind of a platforms, we were able to get the boundary lines. We were able to get an understanding what our employees kind of tools they are using with respect to AI, kind of browsers they are using with respect to AI, and we were not even aware about them. So those logs, because everything goes through these kind of a log, they have that extensive audit trail and logs available that helps you to channelize that kind of a policy where we want to see what is going out and is it in line with our policy or we need to set a boundary. And as you all know, security is a continual improvement. It keeps on improving and evolving. But these kind of a tools and platform becomes our eyes and ear as a security professional, and we are able to answer right to leadership, looking at the data, logs, keeping policies there, looking at the dashboards and all that help. And one critical aspect I like to really highlight, uh, audits. I think compliance is always a byproduct of your process. There is no doubt about it. And I think in an era, I think still 10 years back, it was like certification based processes were evolved. When we used to know these aspects we need in certifications and we need to clear audit, we used to create policies and processes around it. Then cloud came. This all changed. And I can assure you, I think mostly more than us, clients are very critical about it, how my data is saved. Our employees are critical about it, how my data is saved. So from that perspective, and when we go for an audit, now it's not a time that we should have a platform or we should have something that, our certification is going to be there and then we are creating policies. Our policies should be well established, and these cloud native platforms help us in that, enabling those kind of a policies. And when there is an audit, at least we don't have to kind of worry about, we know what policies are there, we know what restrictions we have put, we know what kind of access control mechanisms are there, and through SOC platforms we get an idea that what kind of a data is being transferred, everything we come to know about. So it may be a cloud, it may be an endpoint, all those aspects. When there is an audit, and audit can be different way. For healthcare, it can be PDRP, it can be HIPAA. For finance, it can be different. With different domains, we always need to showcase and prove we have policies in place. One, how those policies are effectively, how they are monitoring. But that is only possible if you have a right dashboards in place, if you have a right data in place. So these kind of a native platforms, one, you can set in a policy. Secondly, what policies you have kept, you can regularly keep on monitoring. You can keep a track of the pattern. And then in case it needs customization, you feel that some noise is getting onto the system and we need some customization in policy. And that helps. But how is that policy possible? Not manually. You need platforms that help you to take a better decision, and they should have a robust dashboards. And these kind of a platforms certainly help in that. And when it comes to audit, it's really easy. It becomes easy, I'll say, rather than, just being fair with the auditor, showing them what is readily available there, and showcasing and getting that audit also cleared. And even for regulatory aspect of it, for example, DPDPA, GDPR, CCPA, audit becomes easy. And with platforms like these, they also get a kind of confidence that okay, things are being managed, and they can see complete PDCA cycle, how we are planning the policies, designing it, how we are tracking it, and how we are acting based on that. So that whole PDCA cycle, in terms of compliance, they are able to see it. That becomes easy. So that is just a key gist of how these kind of a platforms from a practitioner perspective with respect to DPDPA, that it surely helps. Yeah. Any questions? I can take that up.
Priyaji, we will take the question in the Q&A side. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Priyaji. I actually invite Sua to give a CISO lens perspective on this. Over to you, Suaji.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So Many of us who have been CISOs, who are CISOs, and who aspire to be CISOs, privacy and protecting privacy puts on us a very unique kind of challenge and a unique kind of constraint. And in the next 5 minutes, I will try to explain what is my point of view on what those are and how we can address them. So the number one challenge and the number one question we should ask ourselves is that, is my privacy program, the underlying technology that supports my privacy and data protection program, can it scale? Is it set up to scale? It is very easy to set a pilot. It is very easy to do things that work in small pockets, departments, functions, locations. But the moment you scale it to a large organization, pan country, tens of thousands of users, or maybe as you start growing to 100,000 users, it starts to fail. It does not work consistently. So whatever you decide, however you set it up, whatever tools you choose, number one, make sure it can address your scale. The second most important perspective from a CISO's perspective is to ask the next question, which is can my program and my supporting data protection tools support complexity? Because inability to support complexity is what makes your investment go waste. You spend all the money, hire the people, take on your head a significant amount of operating expenses year on year, and on HR and other supporting TPO and the supporting functions as well. But then you realize that your program cannot handle all the different kinds of data types you have, all the different kinds of repositories you have, the different locations you have, and you cannot react and respond with agility. So your program, your tool, your platform is failing you to be able to address complexity. And if it can't do that, that's largely money wasted. That is number two. Number three is what is the interest of the day, which is AI and Gen AI. Because on one hand, you have to enable the use of Gen AI, right? In today's world, you cannot say my company will not use Gen AI because I do not think it is safe, right? And so that's not going to be acceptable to your CEO. So you have to enable Gen AI, but you also have to enable the secure usage of Gen AI. And Gen AI is again very, can be a disaster when it comes to privacy, because it can ingest large amounts of data very quickly at the at the at the at a keystroke. And once it has ingested unwisely input privacy data, it is gone forever from under your control. It's done. So you have to have tools that can enable the usage of Gen AI, but enable it in such a way that it can prevent inappropriate prompt injection when it senses privacy sensitive data. It can detect privacy sensitive data, like going through the wire, it can trigger it, but it also can allow a secure usage. Last but not the least, as a CISO, you will typically have a small team. No CISO I know has the luxury of hiring as many people as she wants or needs. So evidently, as a small team, you will not know everything. You will not be an all-knowing, wise sage. Right? things will change, things will evolve, new risks will show up, which will start impacting your privacy posture. The question you have to ask yourself is that the program that I am setting up, the tools that I am implementing, my platform, how well can it support change? How well can it support new technologies that will start showing up inevitably, right? Today it is Gen AI, tomorrow it will be quantum, it will be something else for sure, right? You will have privacy sensitive data coming from the edge, from IoT devices, what have you. So how will it address a changing world? And with these 5 constraints, these 5 challenges, these 5 questions is where you will start coming to grips with the task and the challenge that you have. I'll summarize. Can it work at scale? Can it handle complexity? Does it allow secure usage of Gen AI apps? Right? Can it address change? Right? And can it address custom data types, which is knowing everything? How will you address all of these? Right? I mean, how can you, other than having a platform which has these attributes, what else do you need to do? This is especially important if you are an organization which has a reasonably large tech team and you actually engineer some of your stuff yourself. If you're in technology, banking, finance, cloud native, an organization, startup, all of this applies to you. Number 1 is privacy by design. Just like security by design, you have to ensure you have privacy by design. And only if you engineer it to be compliant and have privacy by design will you be able to conform to the expectations that the standard imposes on you. Right? And number 2 is, like all the requirements of DPDPA. And if you have expectations of going international, all the requirements of GDPR and the other legislations have to be supported as feature consequences within the platforms that you are building. Only if you, for example, only if you retain data at a certain level of atomic data, can you actually ensure that data is erased once that eraser request comes from the data subject. So if you can't do that, you can't do that, right? So that I think is what I would say in 5 minutes are my CISO's perspective on how you should look at your privacy program. You should look at your privacy platform. You should look at the tools that you are expected to govern in participation, in collaboration with your DPO and your other supporting organizations. Thank you.